So we are in chapter 43. We began chapter 43 last week. Until now, meaning in chapter 41 and chapter 42, we've been discussing at length acquiring an awe of God that's basically the lower dimension. Why do we say lower? Because it's elicited by looking at the world. I look at the world and it inspires me to feel God's presence. It inspires me to feel nullified. It inspires me to have this awe that I need to function as a Jew, to function as someone who is in this world to serve God. But we say in chapter 43, there's a higher level of awe. Why is it higher? This lower level seemed pretty strong and good for us and pretty accessible and very powerful and potent and impactful and all those words. So why do I need something higher? Because we said everything we're discussing in the lower dimension of awe is facilitated by looking at the world, looking at creation. The higher level looks at Creator. In the higher level, I'm not being inspired by creation and its majesty and its grandeur and its power. I'm thinking about God within creation. I'm focusing on God within creation. That inspires a far deeper sense of God's presence, of God's power, of my nullification, of a very, very spiritual, lofty awe of God. And this is not as accessible, meaning the lower dimension, many of us have it naturally. You don't have to study a word of Tanya. It's in our psyche. It's how we're wired. Maybe nowadays less than in previous generations, but it's still pretty natural to access. This higher dimension, we need to really study about God and study about God and really, really sense and feel God's absolute reality, God's absolute immanence, his absolute presence, and from that, feel nullified in front of him. He's right here. He's right here with me now at this moment. It says that when a Jew sits and studies Torah, exactly what every one of us is doing right now, God, so to speak, sits and studies with him, right here with me, right here with each one of you, that close, that intimate. And if you can really feel this, feel the awe. It's not an awe of creation. It's an awe of Creator. So looking inside, let's go, actually we're going to go a little bit back just so we can go through this whole flow of this higher dimension of awe. So let's go from the beginning of the chapter, 13 lines, middle of the line, third word of the 13th line after the period. Achayira ila'ah. But when we're talking about this upper supernal awe of God, yiraboishes, an awe which is an embarrassment, as we discussed at length last week. We are embarrassed because we are giving vitality to evil. We sin because we are tempted. We know that. We don't have to learn that in the books. We know that in real life. And why are we so tempted? Why are we so challenged? Well, for many reasons. And one of them, the way God's system is that evil really benefits if a Jew sins. Because when we sin, our vitality, the inner vitality that's being blown, God's supernal breath that's constantly blown into my soul, is hijacked by evil for the duration of my sin. So that's high motivation for evil to want to get me to sin. So when I think about this, it's embarrassing. It's embarrassing that I feed God's enemy. It's embarrassing that because of me, God is in evil. God is in prison. God is hostage. Because the whole world God speaks into existence, but my soul God blows into existence. A much deeper, more intimate level of self. A very, very deep place, much deeper than words. And that depth of God, God's supernal breath, is now under evil because of me. That's embarrassing. Sin is embarrassing. I'm going against God's will. That's embarrassing. I'm God's only child. I'm spitting in his face. That's embarrassing. So this awe senses that embarrassment, meaning in the lower level awe that we were discussing for chapters 41 and 42, the awe was more coming from God's power and how I could get hurt, right? There's this sense of, I don't want to get punished. Maybe on a more spiritual level, I don't want to get cut off, which is also a form of suffering. And on a pragmatic level, on a physical level, I'm a human being. I look around the world. I see God's power. I see God's potent force. And I see people sometimes getting hurt. I don't want to sin. I need God in my life. I don't want to get hurt by his absence. I don't want to get hurt because he's not in my life, and these bad things could happen to me without his protection. When his protection is removed, who knows what could happen to me? So that's a very basic fear, and awe that's really a fear of punishment. So I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my problems, my hurts, my pains, my vulnerability, my insecurities, and all of that can trigger this awe of God, who can protect me and does, who's with me every step of the way, who carries me, who, because of his protection, I'm safe, and my children are safe, and my life is safe. All of that's true, all of that's real, and all that's lower level. I'm thinking about myself. So in this higher level relationship, I'm not thinking about myself, I'm thinking about God. So I'm embarrassed for the pain I'm giving God. Yes, I'm involved. I'm embarrassed for what I did wrong. But again, the focus is on God because I'm harming God. Because God's intimate powers are now hostage by evil. I'm rebelling against God's authority. I'm denying God's authority. That's embarrassing. So again, the focus here is on God because that's the idea of this upper awe that is connected to, triggered by, relating to God, not creation, but God, but creator. Does someone want to say something? It's not how I'm going to get hurt. That's got nothing to do with it. We're not thinking about that at all. We're thinking about God. Maybe we're thinking about how God could be hurt by my sins. But primarily, we're thinking about God. So as a human being, to be so focused on God's reality, on God's pain, on God's needs, that's a very deep inward work. And that's why the emotional response, this upper level awe, is from a very inward place. And that's why we call it this inner awe, in contrast with the more superficial awe, superficial relationship. Again, superficial does not mean meaningless, does not mean insignificant. The lower level awe is very meaningful and very significant, and we really want you to work on it, and the Alter Rebbe really wants you to work on it, and the Alter Rebbe spent 2 very long chapters giving you lots of advice how to access this lower level awe. So it's not like small change. It's not like, whatever, who cares? No, we care. We care a lot. The Alter Rebbe cares a lot. At the same time, we're opening up our vistas to a much deeper, much more inward work for me, which creates a much more inward relationship with God. Any thoughts, any questions on any of this? Anyone over the week was thinking about either one of these or seeing it in their life, them and their relationship with God and these levels of awe? Okay, so continuing. Now, when we're saying it's an inner awe, the Rebbe says, now let's focus on this reason why. Because it's coming from the inner dimension of God, not the dimension of God that my eye sees, what's in the obvious world around me, but the inner dimension of God, that which my eye does not see, the pulse within creation. Allah Amru, and on this relationship with God, on this dimension of the existence of God that I can't see, I can't touch, I can't directly access, but I know is within creation, on this, the sages said, Imein Chachma Ein Yira. If there's no wisdom, there's no fear, there's no awe of God. Now, why is this interesting that the Alter Rebbe is bringing this quotation? This is a quotation from Ethics of the Fathers. Well, if you have a good memory, you might remember that we use the other half of this quotation in the beginning of the chapter when we were describing the lower awe. And I said then that in this section of Ethics of the Fathers, we go through 4 stanzas. And in each one, we say, if there's not X, there's not Y. And if there's not Y, there's not X. And you're like, well, so what do you do first? If there's not X, there's no Y. All right, I need X. But if there's no Y, there's no X. Okay, I need Y. But then how do I get Y without X? And how do I get X without Y? So it just seems very confusing. And there's different commentators that try to unravel it for us. And the Alter Rebbe's perspective, as we see here in Tanya, as he explains in other places, is that there's actually talking about 2 different levels going on. And that's why this is not a confused, perplexed contradiction in terms statement of the sages. So in the first half, im ein yira ein chachma, if there's no fear of God, there's no awe of God, there's no wisdom, there's not the wisdom of Torah mitzvahs. We said, because what's going to bring you to a service of God, to Torah mitzvahs? The only thing that's going to bring you to a service of God is your fear of God, your natural, innate, knee-jerk response, your sense of vulnerability, your sense of God's vastness, your sense of your smallness, what we can all have without opening up any Torah works, no in-depth study of Tanya required. We all innately have this. And of course, as we study Torah and as we study Tanya, it deepens and broadens, and we have it much more in a much deeper way, in a much more meaningful way. But we all start off with it on some level. Im ein yira ein chachma. If you don't start off with this fear of God, ein chachma, you can't progress to the wisdom of serving God, of Torah and the commandments. You need this as a prerequisite. And we have it. And we can develop it more. And if there's no fear of God, as the Rebbe, the current Rebbe says many times in speaking about the need for a moment of silence in the public schools, the Rebbe would say, the world is a jungle. If we don't inculcate a fear of God, if children grow up without an awareness of God, the world is a jungle. In a jungle, the bigger bully, the bigger animal wins. You know, if the public schools become the jungles of our society, the bigger bully wins, or the one that snuck in the bigger gun wins, or is faster on the gun wins. And that's, of course, the tragedies we have seen. Even one time is way too many times in our public school system, because there's no fear of God. Im ein yira ein chachma. If there's no fear of God, you can't access the wisdom of Torah and her commandments. You need to start with a prerequisite of something of a relationship with God. And once you have that something of a relationship, then you can progress to Torah and her commandments. And now, continuing the statement of our sages, im ein chachma ein yira. But without this wisdom of Torah and her commandments, without this immersion in Torah, you can never access this higher relationship with God, this higher awe. Because this higher awe is not something you're going to wake up in the morning and just like feel, even if you're very sensitive. It comes with a lot of contemplation on a lot of deep subjects in Torah, and of course, specifically in Hasidus, very helped by Tanya and other such works, that we really know God, and we have what to think about, and we have tools to access not God through creation, but God. And as we use those tools and we learn more and we study, contemplate, meditate, think seriously about these topics, what starts to flourish is a fear of God, is an awe, not that came before my service, but that I can ascend to after. Because this very deep, very intimate relationship with God is predicated on service and the awareness of Him and the study of Him. And then with work, I can access this relationship. So again, the Mishnah seems to be saying the same things backwards, like make up your mind. If there's no fear, there's no wisdom. If there's no wisdom, there's no fear. So I start with fear. Well, then I don't have wisdom, but I need wisdom to have fear, but I need fear to have wisdom, so I'm confused. And the Alter says nothing's confusing here. We're talking about 2 different levels. The level of awe that precedes the wisdom of Torah mitzvahs, and the level of awe that's predicated on the wisdom of Torah mitzvahs. That lower awe, which you need to climb the ladder in your service of God. If there's no fear, there's no wisdom. And the higher awe that can only come after you've immersed yourself in serving God, immersed yourself in studying his wisdom, specifically in the inner dimension of Torah, in Chassidus, in works like the Tanya. And then from that study, you can have a relationship, you can aspire to this higher awe, this higher, more intimate relationship with God coming from the wisdom of Torah. So that's why the Rebbe brings us in. We brought the other side when we're discussing the lower one. Now we're bringing this one, we're discussing the higher one, and look how they seamlessly work together. Now we're going to discuss here a little bit more deeply this phrase, Imein Chachma Ein Yira. Because as I explained it until now, I said it superficially and truly, that wisdom is the wisdom of service of God, wisdom of Torah, wisdom of mitzvahs, the commandments. And as we immerse ourselves in the wisdom of Torah, we can ascend to this relationship with God. And that's 100% true. And now we're going to discuss it more deeply. But before we discuss it more deeply, let's just first talk about the truth of the statement in its more simple manifestation. Because, thank God, we have with us many people that have been studying the wisdom of Torah. Tanya, the inner dimension, the secrets of God that we've been learning. And what the Rebbe is saying here, based on our sages, if there's no wisdom, there's no upper awe, that as we immerse ourselves in studying God's wisdom, in studying about God, in studying works like the Tanya, we can ascend to have a deeper relationship with God and a real awe of him. Now, we had one before we started, as we said, but coming from a much deeper, more inner place. So, ladies, what do you think? How have you seen this reflected in your life? As you study the Tanya or other works along these lines of the inner dimension of Torah of Chassidus, how have you seen the awe factor, the nullification to God factor, the awareness of God within all of creation? How have you seen that unfold?
Hi, Rebbetzin.
Hi, Rachel. How are you?
Good, Baruch Hashem. So, I don't know if I would say it of course, in my personal life, I see that, but with everything that's been happening in the last 3 months in Eretz Israel, you mamash sees God's hands in everything that has been happening since then, with all the miracles up to the two men that were, you know. So, so of course, I mean, I don't know how to explain it, but I see it. I mean, when some things happen, either personal or like I had some letting go of some control issues this last week at work, and I see that God put in my, in front of me a certain situation that I really had to deal with within myself rather than with people around me or people I work with. You know what I mean? So, that's how Yirat Hashem jumps at me every once in a while.
So have you seen that as you study more the Tanya, you're more naturally accessing that Yirat Hashem?
Exactly, absolutely. Oh, Tanya have changed me, especially since I moved here. Because I take it more seriously and actually practice what I learn, in my own life. And yeah, definitely. Like in this last episode that I had last week, coming into Shabbos and also into my birthday, and I was very, very upset. And I said, "What are you upset about? You just need to let go and do what you are asked to do. It's not your business, it's not your company, and just, you have a parnasa. That's all you need to think about, So, yeah."
Wow. Anyone else? Anyone else can think about how as they learn more about God through Hasidus, through Tanya, they feel this awe inside of them in a different way than before and can see that?
I have an example.
Sure. A little bit louder, Esther, because you're on a
Okay, can you
phone.
hear me now? How's this? Is this better?
Yes.
Okay, good. Example actually isn't a personal example, but a video that I saw today that's going around of a woman who grew up as a very in a very secular environment in Israel. Maybe you've seen this video, but the woman is so passionate about Torah, and I mean, she must be. I think she must be learning Hasidus, but that's not, that she's just so excited and so overwhelmed that she didn't get this as a child, and our children in Israel are not getting what true Judaism is, and it was just like so passionate and so excited that I recognized that in similar to when learning a concept in Hasidus, and it's like, oh, and then it really can affect the how I've do that mitzvah going forward.
Yep. Wow. So you saw it in the video and you can relate to it and reflect on it in your own life and in your own journey.
And in my own journey vis-a-vis, Hasidus.
Yes. Yeah, I would hope everyone can. I would think it's a pretty straight correlation. I can definitely say for myself, no question, that as I started learning Hasidus, learning the inner dimension of Torah, of learning Tanya, it was just very, God's reality was so real. God's so real, and therefore the relationship with him shifts. Not that there wasn't one before, but the relationship gets deeper and deeper and deeper as God becomes more and more and more real. That's definitely what I experienced. Anyone else? Anyone else would like to add something?
I can add, and I probably studying Torah and Hasidus like about the same time, so it's maybe a little difficult for me to differentiate. But I definitely feel awe, not on the highest level, not on maybe on a level that we're discussing now, but on maybe a lower level. But I feel like awe for Hashem every day. I feel bad if I didn't daven on time, or if I didn't read Tehillim that I promised I'm going to read, or I feel bad, like I'm breaking something in the relationship.
Right. And through your study of Torah and through your study of Hasidus, you know you're in a relationship.
Right.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it. That's a very good way, good frame of reference for us. As we study, the more we study, the more we're in a relationship, and we feel the relationship, and we know we're in this relationship, and we're committed to the relationship. And therefore, things are coming from a deep place, the place of the depth of that relationship. I think that's very, very true. Anyone else? Anyone else want to add something to this? Because I'm sure it's an experience we all have, because we're doing it. We're studying the inner dimension, and automatically our relationship is shifting, our relationship is deepening. That's for sure. Everyone here has experience. Anyone like to add anything to what was said already?
Hi, it's Dottie. Hi. I'm 72. When I was 40 years old, I lived a totally secular life, and I started taking Tanya lessons with Yochanan Nathan and Skokie at the Skokie Chabad. And little by little, I started to I don't, I'm not use the word reinvent, but I changed the way I dress, the way I think. From learning the Tanya, I became an entirely different person when I started to see the world through the eyes of the Alter Rebbe's understanding, and it totally transformed my life. So I'm grateful that Tanya was the hook that helped me to go from being kind of a lost soul secular girl, lady rather, to being able to not be afraid to participate in helping women have babies or take on huge responsibilities. The Tanya was the Alter Rebbe's beautiful medicine for the soul, and I'm grateful. And it's just beautiful. I just saw the whole world differently. Everything looked different, and from learning. So thought I'd share that.
That's
Okay,
beautiful. So you're a testimony to its power.
absolutely.
You're a made by Tanya.
Made by Tanya. Yep, and Skokie.
Made by
And
Tanya.
I'm a testimony to Dottie because I've seen her grow through the years so much, and it's an honor to be so close with her.
Well, I have to thank Sharon Miller for every single Shabbos at her house for years and years and years and years at Skokie, where I was quite super isolated, and she was my island of hope, and her precious
About that, but
they adopted me. They welcomed me in their family, and I became I consider Sharon a sister, and I'm grateful. I'm very grateful to her forever for a long list of things. So also through the Tanya and Yiddishkeit, I got to know my dear friend Sharon Miller, who changed my life as being a super high level friend.
wait, and talk about Hashgacha Pratis. You know how I met Dottie? At the village hall paying a bill in Skokie. So talk about HP, Hashgacha Pratis.
And
So there.
my son, who's a shliach in Springfield, and once he was driving on one of his many trips driving from Springfield to Chicago, he got a speeding ticket. And he had to go to the court, not in Springfield and not in Chicago, but some hick town between Springfield and Chicago to, I think he was trying to fight the ticket. I don't know if he won or if he lost. That wasn't the point of his story. But he says in this small town, he found a Jew who actually lives in Chicago, but has business in Springfield, and also got a speeding ticket driving between Chicago and Springfield, and also had to come the same day, the same time to this little courthouse in Hicksville, USA. And the two of them met, and he put tefillin on him, and he's like, okay, that was worth it, and has a connection with him now, and will, God willing, continue the connection. So yes, even it's all good, and even sometimes the speeding tickets and the bills, and they're all part of God's plan.
Hopefully Hashem paid him back.
I hope so too. I don't ask too many questions. I hope so too. Anyway, so what's really beautiful here, and I think it was so easy and obvious, I mean, what Dottie said, like made by Tanya, I mean, she could just say, this is it. She knew this was her gateway. But all of us, for myself, who was, thank God, born into a religious and Chabad life, and for someone who sees it as clearly as Dottie, we all have such an enormous depth and shift in our relationship and in our own way accessing a deeper and deeper awe, a deeper and deeper relationship with God through studying about God, as we learn through Tanya and other works. Now, the Rebbe is going to take this on another level of depth, because we translated it, if there's no wisdom, there's no upper awe of God, which is 100% true. And we could go on and on and on, and every single person here would have amazing, beautiful things to say, no question. But now we're going to decode an inner lesson within those words. If there's no wisdom, there's no upper awe of God. Because the word in Hebrew for wisdom is chachma. And the word chachma, for those of you that aren't fluent in Hebrew, you'll just take it on faith. really can be split into two words. Chachma is 4 letters, and we can split that into 2 words of 2 letters each. The first 2 letters, which form the word koach, which means a power, and the second 2 letters, which forms the word ma, which means what? Like, what was that? Question mark? So, koach ma, the power that we say on that, huh? What was that? That's how we decode, how we crack open this word chachma, wisdom, and find a deeper level in it. The power that we say, what? And now the Rebbe is going to explain what that means in this context. The chachma hu koach ma. When we're looking at this word chachma, we can break it down into these 2 words, koyach ma. The power, that's a question that I say, what? What was that? V'chachma me'ayin timatzeh. There's another verse that says, chachma me'ayin timatzeh, which simply means, where can you find chachma? Where do you find wisdom? Or, if you take away the question mark and read it as a sentence, it's simply read with a question mark. Where can one find wisdom? But if we read it as a sentence, chachma me'ayin timatzeh. Chachma, koyach ma, the power that I say on that, what? Is found in ayin, in the nothingness, in the total nullification, in the place of not. And there's another saying of our sages that we also use this word chachma. Ezehu chacham. Who is a chacham? Who possesses chachma? Who possesses wisdom? Who possesses this koyach ma, this power that I say, what? Haroya es hanoilad. So Royas HaNoilad generally means one who can see what will be in the future. Like, you really like this piece of cake, but if you can see the future, if you're a chacham, you're going to say, now worth it. I'm not going to feel good. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to have a reaction. I'm going to feel heavy and sluggish and tired. You see the future, you say it's not worth it. Haroya es hanoilad. That's generally, in the most simple sense, what this expression of our sages means. Who is truly wise? One who sees the future, meaning one who can see what will happen as a result of the actions and is therefore impacted. But literally, the words mean who is a chacham, who possesses chachma, who possesses this koyach ma, this power that you ask on it, what? Haroya, one who sees, es hanoilad. Noilad means literally that which was born. So the Alter Rebbe explains, Perush mean to say, Sheroye kol davar, that he sees everything, eich noilad, how it came to be, how it was born, v'nishave, how it's existing, me'ayin liyesh, from nothingness to something, to a substance, to existence, b'dvar havaya, by the word of God. V'ruach piv yisbarach, by the breath of the mouth of God. Kimosha Kasuv, as is written, Ubruach piv kol tzva'am, and with the breath of his mouth, all of the hosts, meaning all the hosts, all the angelic hosts, are vivified through the breath of the mouth of God. So we're saying here that on the simple level, on the first level, which is very true, as we spoke about at length, from Chachma, from the wisdom of God, from studying God's wisdom, studying Torah, studying Chassidus, studying Tanya, comes this upper awe, this higher relationship with God. Yes, and we all attested to it, and we agree. And now the Rebbe is saying there's a deeper meaning also embedded in these words, because Chachma means koyach ma, power that I say, what was that? What does this mean? Koyach ma. Koyach ma, the power, that's like a question mark. It's a power and then it's a question mark, is an expression of nullification to God, being really, really nullified that you can't articulate in words what that is. Koyach, it's a power that you, it's like a flash of lightning. It's like, well, here's the power, but what is that? What was that? What is this? Once you can already articulate what it is, you lost it. Well, you didn't lose it, you gained it. but you lost the chachma quality. I mean, we could also envision like the flash of lightning, and then, you and Benjamin Franklin channeling that flash and making electricity. Well, electricity is very valuable, but you lost the flash because you channeled it and produced electricity. So chachma is the flash. And the partner of chachma, which we refer to as bina, understanding, comprehension, analysis, synthesis, all the intellectual reasoning faculties, that's channeling the flash. So when you channel the flash, it's no longer a flash. It's like Chachma's the point, and then Bina is the line you can extend from those points, those infinite lines from that one point. But the point is so small, I don't know what's going on in that point. That's the Chachma flash. But I can make all those lines of Bina from it. So Chachma implies something I cannot talk about, because if I talk about it, I already lost it. I already drew a box around it. And God is beyond any boxes, and therefore beyond anything I could talk about. And if I am talking about him, that means by definition, it's already come to a lower level. Because on the truer level, there's no talking. It's beyond words. So what's that space where I can't even talk? Just nullification. Just open to the experience of those flashes. That's the Chachma experience. And once you can already articulate and explain and analyze, all right, so you were inspired by Chachma, but you're no longer in the state of Chachma. You've come to the next dimension. You've come to the Bina, the analysis, the intellectual reasoning experience, which is also good, but that's not Chachma. So, im ein Chachma ein Yira, to really have this higher relationship with God, it's predicated on real Chachma. Real Chachma doesn't mean your IQ. Real Chachma doesn't mean your encyclopedic knowledge of anything. Real Chachma means koyach ma, the power that we can just say what, which means total nullification. Because I'm so nullified, I can't describe it. I can't capture it. If I capture it, it becomes something else. It's like every other dimension of God I can talk a lot about. I can very fully flesh it out because it has very clear demarcations, walls, descriptions. Chachma, there's not that much I can say because it's very fluid. It's very non-describable. It's very open to be the vehicle for God's presence. God has 10 powers of self. We call the 10 sfirot or spheros. What we call in English the 10 divine attributes. Now, all those 10, the attribute where God is found is in Chachma. For all the reasons I just explained. Because Chachma has no parameters. There's nothing I can say about it. So fluid, so open, so nullified, there's that much room for the infinity of God. Once you start drawing walls, once you have a lot of identification of self, well, you're squeezing God out and out and out. And when it's totally open, there's nothing you can say. Just total nullification. That's where God is found. And actually, this is a truth we learned all the way in chapter 4 of Tanya. Where is God found? In a place of nullification to him. What is the magnet for God's presence? Nullification. So therefore, from all of the 10 divine attributes, the attribute that is primarily the place of God's residence is Chachma, is Koyach Ma. Is the attribute we're defining as absolute nullification to God. Because that's where he can be found. That's where there's ultimate room for him. That's where he can freely express himself. That's Chachma, Koyach Ma, where God is found. So, im ein Chachma ein Yira. If you don't possess this Chachma, this Koyach Ma, this complete nullification, how can you ascend to a real, true awe of God? Of course, on the lower awe of God, you can, even without a real nullification. You can have a somewhat nullification. And you can completely have this lower, more basic, more knee-jerk reaction to life, awe of God. No problem. You're still full of self, but what you see in the world humbles you and makes you feel vulnerable and makes you feel needy and might make you feel a little scared. So it didn't take away your sense of self, but it got a little, I have a lot of sense of self, but I'm in the presence of a much greater self called God. So I'm nullified. That's beautiful for the first level. But when I'm ascending to the second level, that's not going to work anymore. Imein chachma ein yira. To truly access this level of God relationship, I need to come from chachma. I need to come from koyach ma. I need to really access. And when I'm in that space of nullification, this higher relationship, this higher sublime awe naturally flows. Because when I'm really feeling God's presence without the barriers of self, the natural response is this higher level awe. So it's a very strong point the Rebbe is making here, that to access this emotion, it's not only the road of intellect. Of course, in Tanya, we definitely emphasize the intellectual aspect, the intellectual component, but it's really a divine service coming from another divine service. When I've worked on the divine service of nullification, which is the hard work, as we all probably know, I can naturally flow to the work of this higher relationship of God. That's very natural when I'm coming from this place of complete nullification. Come from a place of complete nullification. That is the challenge. That is the intense work. And then that could go back to our more, as we called it, superficial, simple understanding of this phrase, that wisdom means the wisdom of God, the wisdom of Hasidic thought, the wisdom of Tanya and such works, because the more we immerse ourselves in this Torah, the inner dimension of God, Hasidus, Tanya, the more we could chip away at our sense of self. We probably still will have a strong sense of self, but we can chip away at it. We can lessen it. We can make it more and more refined, more naturally, more easily, the more we're immersed in the chachma, in the wisdom of God. So from the wisdom of God, we can come to the koyach ma factor, the complete nullification to God. And when we're in the space of complete nullification to God, then it's very, very natural to have this higher, deeper, more intimate awe of God experience.